So here we have the kindergarten wall. All year in kindergarten, we've been studying lines and what lines can create in art. So our first project here, we have some landscapes because lines can create landlines. We're inspired by the artist Ted Harrison, and we added in some chili polar bears. Here we learned about lines and how we can use lines to create our bodies and make them dance or jump or sing. Here we have our adorable love monsters, and we use all different kinds of lines to create textures, and then we did some cardboard printing for the backgrounds. Our students were inspired by jury rugs, and we learned about how they're made, and we created our own jury rugs, cutting lines and cutting shapes, and then they added their own yarn to the edges. We also learned that lines put together can create a picture, such as a zebra, a mouse, a lion, and then we did some more printing in the backgrounds, this time with marshmallows. All framed in yellow, we have work by our first grade artists. These collages were inspired by the artist Reggie Laurent. They are abstract. We focus on repetition, pattern, and movement. As we turn the corner, there's some more Reggie Laurent work. And then we looked at an artist named Alma Woodsy Thomas. She created these paintings with dashes of colors. So we first graders created these hearts in the style of Alma Woodsy Thomas. These sleepy portraits were inspired by Gustav Klimt, and we looked at his work and they learned how to draw a blanket in perspective and how to draw their faces on their pillows, and we filled in with patterns and watercolors. And down here we were inspired by the artist Henri Rousseau and his jungle paintings. So he created jungle paintings, as did our students, and then they filled in the background with different greens and blues of tissue paper. Here we have some Kandinsky-inspired hearts, again inspired by our artist Wassily Kandinsky and his famous circle painting. This wall in blue, we have all of our second grade artists. Second grade artists started the year by creating leaf paintings. So they drew their leaves, they learned how to overlap, and we talked about warm and cool colors to make our leaves really stand out from the background. They also created lines in the background to show movement and energy. Here we have some Basquiat-inspired hearts. Students were able to paint the background with lots of colors, and in and around their hearts, they wrote words that are either inspiring to others or words that they are inspired by. Now we're coming into our Matisse collages. So students learned how to cut more than one shape and get the same shape. We talked about symmetry and asymmetry. Students had a choice of what they wanted to use, and we really focused on using all of our papers, even the scraps, positive and negative space, just like Matisse. These Picasso portraits were inspired by Pablo Picasso, and students really had a great time creating these because they are more abstract, colors didn't have to be real, and placement didn't have to be accurate. So they really enjoyed doing these, and again, we focused on those warm and cool colors to make them pop. All in green is our third grade artwork. We started the year by doing these foil embossings where they put string down and then they embossed over it and then colored it in however they like. Here we have our stained glass animals. Students were able to choose an animal, either from the rainforest, or some students chose an animal that they researched in class. So we had a nice connection between our class research and our paintings that we did in art. And here we have our 3rd grade birch tree paintings. They first listened to a poem by Robert Frost. We discussed depth and space. Trees in the backgrounds and further away are smaller, and the birch trees in the foreground are larger and fill up a lot of the space. Now in orange, we have our 4th graders. They started off the year with a little project to get to know them. And they did 3-dimensional stars, and in the background, all the reasons that they are a star. Here we have our Kerry Ambrosino inspired still lives. We looked at folk art and patterns, repetition to create these still lives. These beautiful landscapes were inspired by our artist Jen Arani, and students looked at her work and then tried to create a landscape in that style using space and depth. In this project, we looked at Japanese notan, the most famous being the yin and yang symbol, and they created these beautiful collages with positive and negative space and shapes. So coming up, we have our work by our 5th graders. We started with an animal tile. They were able to choose any animal that they would like, and we worked on what we call relief, and we used subtractive sculpture for this. We have our Zentangles, which was a very calming activity, lots of lines, patterns, and followed it up with our watercolor painting, changing the value. Here we have our 5th graders onomatopoeia pop art. Students looked at all different onomatopoeia words and then had the mission to visually illustrate their word so that you would know what it was. These are some of our Tim Burton inspired self-portraits. Students learned how to draw a self-portrait that is stylized, doesn't have to look exactly realistic, and they learned how to create shadows and highlights to give it that real Tim Burton feel. Here we have our step classes that spend lots of time in art, exploring different materials, different art mediums, and creating some of these really